Off the coast of South Africa, a killer whale flips a great white shark upside down, holds it still, and opens it in under 2 minutes to pull out the liver. After a few of these strikes, the sharks vanish. One stretch of coast went 45 days with a single great white sighting. This is the animal nothing is supposed to frighten. And yet, in the cold water off Iceland, that same predator goes suddenly silent and runs. From a whale half its size that has never been recorded killing a single orca. What could possibly do that? Start with how far the orca sits above everything else, because you need to feel the size of the drop. Killer whales live in every ocean on Earth, from the ice edges of both poles to the warm water of the tropics. They hunt in coordinated groups, and depending on where they live and what their family has learned, the menu can be almost anything. Herring, salmon, seals, dolphins, sharks, sea lions, even the calves of the largest animals that have ever lived. Nothing hunts a healthy adult orca. It is the one predator with no predator above it, and it has held that position for as long as we have been watching. Part of why it sits so high is that the orca isn't just powerful, it's smart, and it hunts as a team. Different populations use completely different techniques, passed down through families like traditions. Some wash seals off ice floes by charging in a line to make a wave. Some slap fish with their tails to stun them. Some work together to separate a whale calf from its mother over hours of patient, coordinated pressure. This is an animal that plans, communicates constantly, remembers, and adjusts. When you understand that the killer whale is essentially the ocean's most capable problem solver with teeth, its dominance stops looking like brute strength and starts looking like strategy. Keep that word in mind, strategy, because it's the key that eventually unlocks why this same animal turns and runs. The South African story is the clearest proof of that dominance most people have ever seen. Two orcas, the researchers nicknamed Port and Starboard, along with a handful of others, learned to hunt great white sharks with a precision that stunned scientists who study both animals. In footage captured by drone and helicopter, they grip a shark, flip it, and go straight for the liver, an organ rich in oil and energy, the single most valuable part of the animal. The 2022 study documenting it, led by shark scientist Alison Towner, recorded something even stranger than the kill. After the attacks, the great whites didn't just lose a few individuals, they abandoned the region. At Mossel Bay, a place where sharks had been seen almost daily, survey teams counted a single white shark in the 45 days that followed. An entire population of apex sharks read the signs and left. So set the question properly. If the great white, the shark that has terrified swimmers for 50 years, flees the orca and empties whole coastlines to avoid it, then the orca is not afraid of the great white. The great white is food. Whatever makes a killer whale run has to be something else entirely, something the size ladder can't predict. And for a long time, the honest answer was that we didn't have one. Then researchers off Iceland started seeing something they couldn't explain. Filippa Samara, who runs the Icelandic Orca Project, first witnessed it in 2015 in the choppy water south of the island. She was watching a group of killer whales when another pod of animals moved toward them. The orcas, which had been calling constantly, went quiet. High-pitched whistles filled the water instead, and the killer whales turned and swam away. Not casually, they left. Over the following years, Samara and her colleagues logged around 20 of these encounters, and the pattern held. The ocean's top predator was avoiding something, again and again, in the same waters. Here's the part that makes it absurd. The animals the orcas were fleeing were long-finned pilot whales, stocky, round-headed, dark-bodied toothed whales that grow to roughly half the length of a big killer whale. They eat squid. They have no great slashing teeth built for large prey, no reputation as a danger to anything bigger than themselves. In the entire record of these interactions, there is not one documented case of a pilot whale killing an orca. Picture the most efficient predator in the sea, the animal that dismantles great whites like it's opening a can, going silent and sprinting away from a squid eater. It could, on paper, kill. That is the contradiction, and every easy way out of it fails. The first instinct is to assume the threat must be something more dangerous, because that's how fear is supposed to work in the ocean. Danger flows downhill. Small things fear big things, and the biggest, most capable hunter fears nothing. Under that logic, if anything scared an orca, it would have to be a larger shark, a bigger predator, some heavyweight higher up a ladder the orca doesn't actually have. But the pilot whale isn't higher up anything. It's smaller, slower, and built for chasing squid in the deep, not for fighting. Whatever is happening here breaks the size rule completely, which means the size rule was never the real story. So look harder at what a pilot whale actually is, because the answer isn't in any single animal, it's in the group. Pilot whales are intensely social. They travel in large, tight-knit pods, sometimes dozens strong, and those pods move and react as a single coordinated unit. The name comes from the idea that the pod follows a leader, a pilot. They are among the most vocal animals in the sea, constantly whistling and calling to hold the group together. On its own, a pilot whale is no threat to a killer whale, but a pilot whale almost never shows up on its own. It shows up as a wall of bodies and a storm of sound, all moving in the same direction at once. Hold on to that, because coordination is the only weapon in this story that matters. The Icelandic encounters made the pattern undeniable. Usually the killer whales simply avoid, they detect the pilot whales and peel away before anything escalates. But not always. In some encounters, the pilot whales press the issue and chase, driving the orcas at high speed, both species porpoising clean out of the water in a running pursuit across the surface. And through all of it runs that same eerie tell Samara noticed the first day. The killer whales, normally so talkative, go silent. Whatever they're doing when the pilot whales arrive, it starts with shutting up and getting out. Now the obvious explanation steps forward, and it sounds reasonable. They must be fighting over food. Predators clash when they want the same meals, and maybe the pilot whales are muscling in on the orcas' hunting grounds. But the diets don't cooperate. The killer whales in these Icelandic waters are specialists that live mainly on herring, herding, and stunning schools of fish near the surface. The pilot whales are after squid, which they hunt in deep dives far below where the herring run. Different prey, different depths, different parts of the water column entirely. There's almost nothing for the two of them to fight over. The economic motive that would make a turf war make sense just isn't there. Fine, then maybe the pilot whales are simply dangerous in some way we're not crediting. Maybe, in a real clash, they could hurt or kill an orca, and the killer whales know it. But the record says otherwise. Across all these documented interactions, with pilot whales chasing and harassing and driving killer whales off, there is no confirmed case of a pilot whale actually killing one, or even seriously injuring one. So it isn't fear of death, and it isn't a fight over lunch. Both of the explanations a reasonable person would reach for first are gone, and the orca is still running. If anything, the mystery is now worse than when we started, because we've stripped away every ordinary reason a predator retreats. This is where a study published in early 2026 changed the question from, why do they run, to something sharper. A team led by Anna Selbman decided to test the fear directly, instead of waiting for chance encounters. They fitted killer whales with suction cup tags that record movement and sound, then played recordings through underwater speakers, 15-minute clips of pilot whale calls, along with control sounds and artificial tones for comparison. The point was simple. If the orcas react to the mere sound of pilot whales, with no actual pilot whales present, then this isn't about a physical confrontation at all. It's about what the sound predicts. The orcas reacted, hard. When the pilot whale calls came through the water, the killer whales fled at close to double their normal traveling speed. They cut their own calling sharply, and in 5 of the 8 tagged groups, they went completely silent, the same silence Samara had watched fall over that first encounter years earlier. They pulled in tight, swimming in close, synchronized lines instead of spreading out to wander and hunt. There were no pilot whales there, only their voices, played from a speaker. And the response the researchers measured looked less like mild annoyance and more like the way killer whales react to naval sonar, a full, urgent, get-out-now retreat. Think about what that combination of behaviors actually means, because each piece tells you something. Going faster is obvious. Put distance between yourself and the source. Bunching into a tight formation is what animals do when they want to protect the vulnerable members of a group, the young ones in the middle. And falling silent is the strangest and most telling of the three. A killer whale's calls are how it coordinates, hunts, and stays in contact with its family. Shutting them off is a cost. The only reason to pay that cost is if being heard is more dangerous than being out of touch, if the sound you make could bring the very thing you're trying to escape. That's not the behavior of an animal reacting on instinct to a nuisance. That's an animal managing a threat it takes seriously. That single result reorganizes everything. The killer whales aren't losing a fight and fleeing. They aren't even waiting to see the pilot whales. They hear the group coming from a distance and leave before the two ever meet. The avoidance is preemptive, and it's acoustic. Somewhere in the killer whale's mind, the sound of a large pilot whale pod has been filed under "not worth being here for," and the moment that sound arrives, the decision is already made. Which finally points at the real mechanism. Not what pilot whales do to orcas, but what a smart, long-lived animal decides is worth its time. The leading explanation is mobbing. It's a behavior you may have seen on land without knowing the name. Small birds swarming and harassing a hawk or an owl, diving at it in a screaming crowd until the far more dangerous predator simply leaves. The birds can't kill the hawk. They don't need to. They just need to make staying more expensive than going. Pilot whales appear to do the ocean version. They may treat killer whales as a predator to be driven off, and in many parts of the world that instinct is well earned. Orcas elsewhere absolutely do hunt smaller cetaceans, including minke whales, belugas, and narwhals. A pilot whale pod that mobs any killer whale on sight is playing a smart, blunt strategy. Don't wait to find out whether this particular orca is a fish eater or a whale eater. Just overwhelm it and move it along. And from the orca's side, the retreat isn't weakness, it's arithmetic. Killer whales are long-lived, slow to reproduce, and they travel in families with calves that take years to raise. Getting into a chaotic, high-speed scrap with a large coordinated group carries real risk, a hurt calf, an injury, an exhausting chase, and offers absolutely no reward, because the orca doesn't even eat pilot whales. There is nothing on the table to win and something real to lose. For an animal that intelligent, the correct move is obvious. Don't engage. Leave early, leave fast, and don't waste a heartbeat announcing your position while you do it. The same brain that makes orcas such devastating, calculating hunters is the brain that refuses a pointless fight. Running is the smart play, and the orca is nothing if not smart. You can see the same logic at work in a completely different animal, which is how you know it's a real principle and not just an Icelandic quirk. Killer whales do sometimes attack sperm whales, and researchers have documented those hunts. But a group of healthy adult sperm whales rarely just gets eaten. They pull into what scientists call a marguerite formation. Bodies arranged like the petals of a flower, heads pointed inward and powerful tails facing out, the weak and the young sheltered in the center. Against that living wall of muscle, an orcapod that pushes too hard risks a broken jaw for very little return, and the killer whales often break off. Notice the shape of it. It isn't that the orca can't win. It's that a coordinated defense turns an easy meal into an expensive gamble, and the orca, weighing the odds, decides the gamble isn't worth it. Pilot whales exploit the exact same instinct, except they don't even have to be prey worth chasing. They just have to make themselves too costly to be near. The picture even holds up from the other direction. Research off Norway found that pilot whales will approach the sound of killer whales. The mob doesn't just defend, it comes looking. Put that beside the Icelandic result and you get a coherent, slightly unnerving loop. The pilot whales move toward the predator's voice, and the predator moves away from theirs. And the orca pays for that arrangement every time. A pod that flees is a pod that stops hunting, burns energy it needed for the herring, and gets pushed off good water by an animal it isn't even competing with for food. Samara has said it plainly. Something in this ecosystem seems to have changed, and the researchers are still working out what. The killer whale isn't just occasionally inconvenienced, it's repeatedly giving ground. That detail matters more than it first sounds. These interactions weren't always this common, or at least weren't always this noticed. And the fact that they seem to be happening more often hints that the balance between the two species may be shifting, changing prey, changing distributions, changing overlap in the same patch of ocean. When two intelligent animals keep crossing paths in new ways, their behavior toward each other can change fast, and we may be watching a relationship rewrite itself in real time. It's a reminder that even the apex predator isn't fixed in place at the top. It's a player in a system, and the system moves. So what, in the end, is the ocean's top predator actually afraid of? Not the great white, which it eats. Not something bigger, because nothing bigger threatens it. Not a rival at its dinner, because the pilot whale eats squid it never wanted. And not a killer, because the pilot whale has never been recorded landing a lethal blow. Strip all of that away and what's left is a coordinated, relentless, deafening mob that an orca gains nothing from fighting and can lose real things by staying near. Afraid turns out to be our word, not the animal's. What the killer whale is doing isn't cowardice, and it isn't panic. It's a cold, fast risk calculation by a strategist that measures every encounter and folds the ones that aren't worth playing. That's what the old assumption got right and wrong at the same time. It was right that the orca responds to threat. It clearly does, urgently, at the first sound. It was wrong about the shape of the threat. We assumed anything that scared the top predator had to be deadlier and larger, a monster from higher up the food chain. Instead, the thing that moves it is smaller, non-lethal, and something it doesn't even hunt. The honest part is that we still can't fully separate the reasons. The researchers are careful to say they don't yet know whether this is fear, competition for space, or some mix of both, and they call it genuinely unexplained why an apex predator avoids a smaller, seemingly inferior aggressor. Different orca populations may even handle it differently, since the ones that do hunt small whales have a different relationship with the mob than the fish eaters of Iceland. Which brings it back to the silence. That's the detail to keep, because its meaning flips completely by the end. When Samara first watched a chatty group of killer whales fall quiet and slip away, it looked like the hush of something cornered, the ocean's great hunter suddenly acting like prey. It isn't that. The silence is the sound of a top predator making a decision. It goes quiet because calling would give away its position to a group it has already chosen to avoid. And it leaves because there is simply no version of that fight worth having. The great white flees the orca because the orca will kill it and eat its liver. The orca flees the pilot whale because it won't gain a thing by staying. One retreat is terror, the other is intelligence. And the strange, humbling truth scientists have finally started to pin down is that the animal at the very top of the ocean runs not from something stronger, but from something it was never going to profit from fighting. And even now, watching it happen again and again, we can't say for certain everything going on in its head as it disappears into the dark.